What happens when a CEO's daughter goes undercover as a cleaner and discovers the ugly truth about workplace discrimination? Let's dive in to see how one experiment changes everything. Dr. Elaine Robinson was not your ordinary CEO. At 52, she was the proud founder of Pinnacle Pharmaceuticals, a cutting-edge research company that had grown rapidly in the past 15 years. Her business had started as a small lab that she managed with just 3 researchers in a quiet industrial park. Over time, thanks to her brilliance and vision, Pinnacle had expanded into a successful corporation with facilities across the country. But as the business grew, Elaine felt more and more disconnected from the day-to-day culture. Reports and metrics were no longer enough for her to truly understand what was happening on the ground. She often wondered if her company values of respect and equality were being upheld when she wasn't present. This concern became especially important as her daughter, Zoe, was about to join the company. Zoe had just graduated with honors from Harvard Business School and was eager to follow in her mother's footsteps. But before stepping into an executive role, Zoe wanted to understand the company from the inside out. "Mom," Zoe said during their Sunday dinner, "I've been thinking about how to start at Pinnacle." Dr. Robinson looked up from her plate. "The executive training program is all set up for you. You'll be working directly with our leadership team." Zoe shook her head. "That's not what I mean. I want to know what the company is really like, not what people show to the boss's daughter." Dr. Robinson raised an eyebrow. "What are you suggesting?" "I want to go undercover," Zoe explained. "Not as a scientist or administrator, but as someone invisible, like a member of the cleaning staff. I want to see how people behave when they think no one important is watching." Her mother considered this. "It would be revealing. When I started Pinnacle, I cleaned the labs myself. The way people treat cleaning staff says everything about their character." 2 days later, Zoe arrived at Pinnacle's headquarters with a new identity. Gone were her designer clothes and carefully styled hair. Instead, she wore a simple uniform, her hair pulled back under a cap, and minimal makeup. The company's head of facilities, Mr. Washington, was the only person besides her mother who knew her true identity. "Everyone will know you as Zoe Wilson," he explained, handing her a badge. "You're assigned to the executive floor and research wing. That's where you'll see the most interesting behaviors." Zoe nodded, taking the badge and cleaning cart. "Thank you, Mr. Washington. I appreciate your help with this." "Just be prepared," he warned. "People show their true colors when they think they're talking to someone they can dismiss." Zoe's first day began at 5 a.m., 2 hours before most executives would arrive. She worked alongside Maria, a middle-aged woman who had been cleaning at Pinnacle for 8 years. "You'll learn quickly," Maria assured her as they emptied trash bins and wiped down surfaces. "Most people won't even notice you're there. It's like being invisible." Maria's words proved prophetic. As employees began arriving around 7 a.m., Zoe observed how most walked past without acknowledgement. Some even dropped trash on freshly cleaned floors, seemingly oblivious to the work that had just been done. By mid-morning, Zoe was cleaning the main conference room after a meeting. As she wiped down the whiteboard, the door opened. A group of executives entered, continuing their conversation without pausing. "We need that report by end of day," said a tall man in an expensive suit. Zoe recognized him as Richard Phillips, Vice President of Marketing. She had seen his photo in company materials. "Excuse me," Zoe said politely. "I'm still cleaning in here." Phillips barely glanced in her direction. "Just work around us. We have important business to discuss." Another executive, a woman named Diane Mercer, looked apologetic but said nothing as the group spread their materials across the table Zoe had just cleaned. Zoe continued working silently, listening as they discussed quarterly projections. When she accidentally knocked over a trash can, Philip sighed dramatically. "Can you be more careful? Some of us are trying to run a company here." "Sorry, sir," Zoe replied, quickly picking up the spilled contents. "This is why education matters, people," Philip said to his colleagues, not bothering to lower his voice. "Otherwise you end up pushing a mop for a living." 2 of the executives chuckled, while Diane looked uncomfortable. A younger executive named James Chen frowned but remained silent. After Zoe left the room, she made notes on her phone about the interaction, careful to record names and specific comments. Throughout the day, similar patterns emerged. Some employees, mainly mid-level managers and junior staff, were polite or at least neutral. Others, particularly those in more senior positions, seemed to view the cleaning staff as beneath their notice. During lunch in the cafeteria, Zoe cleaned tables while observing the social dynamics. She noticed distinct groupings. Executives sat together, researchers had their own tables, and administrative staff clustered separately. The cleaning and maintenance staff ate quickly at the back of the room, often cutting their breaks short to return to work. As Zoe wiped down a table near the executive group, she overheard Phillips again. "Did you see Robinson's latest diversity initiative?" he was saying to his colleagues. "More unconscious bias training. As if we don't have real work to do." "It's important," said James Chen, the executive who had seemed uncomfortable earlier. "Studies show diverse teams perform better." Studies, Phillips mocked. "Look, no offense, but some of us earned our positions the old-fashioned way, not through some diversity quota." Zoe's hand tightened around her cleaning cloth. She continued working, her face carefully neutral as she absorbed every word. As the week progressed, Zoe settled into her role, becoming more adept at both cleaning and observing. She maintained detailed notes in a secure app on her phone, documenting interactions and behaviors she witnessed throughout the building. On her third day, Zoe was assigned to clean the research wing, where scientists worked on Pinnacle's groundbreaking medications. Here, she noticed a different atmosphere. Most researchers were deeply focused on their work, barely registering her presence, not out of disrespect, but genuine absorption in their tasks. Dr. Amara Okafor, the head of research, actually smiled and thanked Zoe when she came to clean her office. "Would you mind coming back in about 20 minutes? Dr. Okafor asked kindly. "I'm just finishing these calculations." "Of course, no problem," Zoe replied, noting the interaction in her mental log of positive behaviors. Later that afternoon, while cleaning near the executive bathrooms, Zoe overheard a conversation that made her blood boil. Phillips was speaking with Bradley Thompson, the chief operating officer, just around the corner. "Between us," Phillips was saying, "I don't think the Robinson girl is ready for an executive position. Her mother's just handing it to her." "She graduated top of her class at Harvard," Thompson replied. Phillips scoffed. "Please, you know how these schools are with their affirmative action these days. Someone probably wrote her papers for her." Zoe froze, fighting to maintain her composure. As the footsteps approached, she busied herself with organizing her cleaning supplies, keeping her head down as the two men passed. "Excuse me," Phillips said impatiently, gesturing for her to move her cart aside. "Sorry, sir," Zoe mumbled, stepping back. As they walked away, Phillips added loudly enough for her to hear, "The cleaning staff gets slower every year. We should outsource the whole department." That evening, Zoe met with her mother at home, sharing her observations while maintaining confidentiality about specific employees. "It's worse than I expected in some departments," Zoe admitted. "There's this culture of superiority among certain executives. They don't just ignore the cleaning staff, they actively look down on us." Dr. Robinson nodded gravely. "And these would be the same people training you if you entered through the executive program." "Exactly. But it's not everyone," Zoe added. "Some people are respectful regardless of who they're talking to. Dr. Okafor in research, James Chun in marketing. A few others. Character reveals itself when no one important is watching," her mother said. "That's something my own mother taught me." On Friday morning, Zoe was cleaning the glass walls of a meeting room when she witnessed something particularly troubling. A young black researcher named Layla was presenting data to a group including Phillips and several other executives. "These results show a 23% improvement over the control group," Layla explained, pointing to her slides. "Are you sure you're interpreting the data correctly?" Phillips interrupted. "These conclusions seem like a stretch." "I've verified the analysis 3 times," Layla replied confidently. The statistical significance is clear. Phillips exchanged glances with another executive. Let's have Dr. Miller review this before we move forward. No offense, but we need to be absolutely certain. After the meeting, Zoe observed Layla in the hallway, speaking with James Chun. He always questions my work. James? Layla said, her voice tight with frustration. Dr. Miller's analysis was less thorough than mine, but Phillips never doubts him. I know, James replied. I've noticed it too. Your work is excellent and everyone else recognizes it. Don't let him shake your confidence. Zoe made a special note of this exchange. By the end of the week, she had filled pages with observations, who respected others regardless of position, who changed their behavior depending on who was watching, and who consistently treated service staff as inferior. On the following Monday morning, Dr. Elaine Robinson called an unexpected all-hands meeting for the executive team and department heads. The conference room filled quickly with curious managers wondering about the urgent summons. Richard Phillips arrived last, slipping into a seat near the front with an air of casual confidence. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, Dr. Robinson began. Before we start, I'd like to introduce someone who will be joining our leadership team. She gestured toward the door. Please welcome my daughter, Zoe Robinson. The door opened, and Zoe walked in. Gone was the cleaning uniform and cap. Instead, she wore a tailored suit, her hair styled professionally. A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. Several executives looked confused, leaning forward to get a better look. Many of you have already met Zoe, Dr. Robinson continued with a pointed look. Though you may not have realized it at the time. Zoe stepped forward. For the past week, I've been working as a member of the cleaning staff throughout our headquarters. I wanted to understand our company culture from the ground up, to see how we treat all our employees, not just those with impressive titles. The room fell silent. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Phillips maintained his composure, though his jaw tightened visibly. During my time undercover, Zoe continued, I observed how our leadership team interacts with support staff. I noticed which of you acknowledge the humanity of every person in this building, and which of you do not. She paused, making eye contact with several executives. What I discovered was both encouraging and deeply troubling. Zoe picked up a tablet and began to present specific examples, without naming individuals yet. She described moments of respect and kindness, as well as incidents of dismissiveness and outright contempt. The way we treat people when we think no one important is watching reveals our true character, Zoe said, echoing her mother's words. And character is the foundation of leadership. Dr. Robinson stood again. At Pinnacle, we develop medications that save lives. Our work demands integrity at every level. We cannot tolerate a culture where some employees are deemed less worthy of basic human respect than others. Zoe nodded and continued, based on my observations, I'd like to recognize some individuals whose behavior exemplified our company values. She called out several names, including James Chen and Dr. Amara Okafor, describing specific moments when they had shown respect and kindness to cleaning staff and junior employees. Then her expression grew more serious. Unfortunately, I also witnessed behavior that directly contradicts everything Pinnacle stands for. She turned to face Phillips. Mr. Phillips, would you care to comment on your statement that the Robinson girl likely had someone else write her Harvard papers? Or perhaps your remarks about our diversity initiatives being a waste of time? Phillips blanched, then quickly recovered. I think there's been some misunderstanding. If something I said was taken out of context, there is no context that makes such behavior acceptable, Dr. Robinson interrupted firmly. Nor is there context that justifies how you spoke to cleaning staff or your treatment of Dr. Layla Jackson's research. Dr. Robinson turned to address the entire room. Effective immediately, we will be implementing changes to ensure Pinnacle's culture reflects our values at every level. She outlined several new initiatives, including anonymous reporting systems, revised performance evaluations that included metrics for respectful behavior, and mandatory training. Finally, she said, we will be restructuring certain leadership positions. She looked directly at Phillips and two other executives Zoe had identified as problematic. Mr. Phillips, Mr. Dawson, and Ms. Harris, please remain after this meeting. The rest of you are dismissed. The room fell silent as the three executives realized what was happening. Phillips, still trying to maintain his composure, straightened his tie. The rest of you will receive an email detailing our new initiatives, Dr. Robinson continued. And I'm pleased to announce that Zoe will be joining Pinnacle officially next week as our new director of organizational culture. As the room emptied, whispers erupted among the departing executives. Zoe made eye contact with James Chun, giving him a small smile of acknowledgement. Once only Phillips, Dawson, Harris, and the Robinsons remained, Dr. Robinson's tone changed. I've reviewed the detailed reports of your conduct, she said coldly. The discriminatory comments, the disrespect shown not just to cleaning staff but to researchers whose work you've undermined, particularly women and people of color. Phillips attempted to interject. Dr. Robinson, with all due respect. Respect, Zoe cut in. That's precisely what's been lacking. I witnessed you dismiss Dr. Jackson's research without basis, only to accept the same conclusions from Dr. Miller without question. We have a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, Dr. Robinson continued. Your employment at Pinnacle is terminated, effective immediately. Harris gasped. You can't do this. I've been with Pinnacle for 8 years. 8 years during which you've created a hostile work environment, Zoe replied, pulling up specific examples on her tablet. Would you like me to read aloud what you said about Maria's English skills when you thought no one was listening? Harris fell silent, her face flushed. Security arrived to escort the three executives to collect their belongings. As they left, Phillips turned back. You'll regret this, he said. The board won't stand for you firing senior leadership based on some little spy game. Dr. Robinson smiled confidently. The board approved this investigation. They've seen the full report and unanimously support these terminations. Pinnacle's success depends on innovation, which requires an environment where all voices are heard and respected. After they were gone, Zoe sighed. That was harder than I expected. Leadership often is, her mother replied. But what you've done was necessary. The next morning, Zoe entered the building through the main entrance, dressed professionally but carrying a box of pastries. She made her way to the maintenance area where the cleaning staff gathered before their shift. Zoe. Maria looked shocked to see her. Or should I say, Ms. Robinson now? Just Zoe is fine, she replied, setting down the pastries. I wanted to thank you all personally. Working alongside you taught me more about this company than any executive training program could have. Mr. Washington nodded approvingly. So what happens now? Now, Zoe said, we make changes, starting with improved wages and benefits for all support staff. She outlined the immediate changes: schedule flexibility, educational assistance, and a clear path for advancement within the company. Why would you care about us? One of the younger cleaners asked skeptically. You're still the boss's daughter. Because no company succeeds when it only values some of its people, Zoe replied. My mother built Pinnacle from nothing, cleaning her own labs at night after everyone left. She taught me that every role matters, and how you treat people when you think no one's watching defines who you really are. Over the coming weeks, Zoe implemented her changes systematically. She promoted James Chun to fill Phillips' position and established mentoring programs to support employees like Dr. Jackson. Most importantly, she continued to regularly walk the floors of Pinnacle, talking with employees at all levels. 3 months later, employee satisfaction scores had risen by 32%. Productivity and innovation metrics showed similar improvements. At a company town hall, Dr. Robinson proudly introduced Zoe as her eventual successor. Leadership isn't about titles or corner offices, Zoe told the assembled staff. It's about creating an environment where everyone can do their best work and be treated with dignity. My week as a cleaner showed me both what was broken and what was possible at Pinnacle. She gestured toward Maria and the other cleaning staff, now seated in the front row rather than standing at the back. Every person in this building contributes to our success, and from now on, Every person will share in it. As applause filled the room, Zoe looked at her mother, who nodded with pride. The experiment had been painful but necessary, revealing truths that might otherwise have remained hidden for years. Sometimes, the most important perspective is from the bottom looking up. If you enjoyed this story about workplace transformation and justice, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content that explores important social issues. Share your thoughts in the comments below.